Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. Thrilled to be here with you. Thanks for joining me again on the podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful week. We are wrapping up the school year, so it's really exciting times. Let's get into our announcements. First things first, the Let's Get Gritty podcast, it will be featured on the Spotify, also on my main social media outlets. You can find my social media outlets at Facebook being Miss India White. And I have a couple different ones out there too. So, but Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. Check out the website, www.india-white.com for books, blogs, or to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event. I'd be honored to join you. We've got some events coming up, FCTM conference. We've got a virtual conference in Texas. And then, of course, you always have the G.R.I.T Academy, where I'm here servicing students across the nation, however they need to be served. Also, the Grassroots Workshop, check that out. That's on Robert Kaplinski's stuff there. Also, just a reminder about the G.R.I.T Academy. If you're needing online tutoring, you need to get with me ASAP because I'm taking kiddos and families today. Now, I want to talk with you about what's going on in education in general, because we're at the end of the school year. And so, all the cards on the table, we are doing what we can to wrap up the school year. We want to make sure that we have as much proficiency and success as students. And I mean, even my kiddos are wrapping up the school year, taking their exams. It's a lot of excitement. A lot going on. Graduations are being decided right now. Some of these states, students are needing to pass those exams to graduate. So I want to talk a little bit today about some of the stuff I found regarding this. And I want to talk about gritty proficiency, tips for bouncing back in academic achievement. Why tips for bouncing back? Because that's exactly what America needs. It's pretty tough. When you look at some of the articles, we'll be going over today about what's going on, just kind of like the scope and sequence of what's going on in general across America. I find it very interesting because, like, from an outsider, someone that's looking in, you would think that we've got great talent, we've got great authors, doing great things with our kids. So yeah, kids are performing. But what you're going to find is that there is actually a disconnect. It's not what we thought it was. And so I'm going to go over the data, the meat and potatoes of that with you. So bear with me today as we get through this. It's kind of toxic when you look at some of the things and you kind of put it together and realize what's been going on across our nation. It's just kind of heavy. But anyway, we're going to jump into this. So first things first is I want to give you my tips for academic achievement. First, you should build teacher-student relationships. Students don't care about how much we know until they know how much we care. There's a lot of disconnect, especially in the math classroom, because students are coming to us with anxieties from math and, it's a lot. It's a lot when you fail an exam and you have to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going to tutoring, and then you're still not getting by and you don't understand how they talk because we don't talk like that in everyday language. So there's a cultural disconnect with some of the problems that are being used. Like I remember seeing a problem when I was younger about skiing and stuff. And I live in Florida. So I was like, what is that? And then I remembered I was an underserved kid. And so I remember there were examples about going on your uncle's yacht and things like that. And I'm like, what is a yacht? I had no idea what a yacht was. And I never had a teacher really explain that to me because there was this assumption that, we all are going on yachts with our uncles on the weekends. Anyways, so, there needs to be some revisitation of this here. Also, I think there should be praising of student efforts instead of running towards, just the negativity of the classroom. We should focus on student efforts. I was working for a school one year where they had positive referrals, but the principal was such a negative person that they decided to cancel the negative or the positive referrals and only keep the negative referrals because he stated that there were too many positive referrals going on at that school. It was a crazy situation. And yeah, they were able to do whatever they wanted to do because it was a private situation. So whatever. But I think that's pretty crazy that you would cancel positive referrals. um, I think we need to do better with praising student efforts, notes home to parents. When's the last time we wrote notes to parents? I got one positive phone call I remember about my child, and it made my day. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like good. They're not in trouble. It's nothing, nothing cumbersome. They're not in trouble. This is good." Um, we need more of that for our classes. Also, the third point here, advocate for students. Instead of trying to put them in school to prison pipeline because you don't like the way they look or the way they come in or their culture, let's see how we can advocate for these kids and have more empathy, because I tell you, they need that more than ever. 4, representation and leadership. What are we doing to have more diverse leadership? I don't care what people say. Having diversity is powerful. Having diversity makes all the world of a difference. If you're dealing with little children that are diverse, say you're dealing with African American girls and boys, since that seems to be the main group that is targeted and hurt the most in our education system. What if they come to school with a various hairstyle and you want to make a math lesson out of it? Instead of shaming them and making them feel bad because they don't have a certain look, maybe you can look into their culture and look into why they chose those hairstyles and how cool they are and how much math is actually involved and intertwined into those. And I tell you, if you do something like that, you'll win them over, because the kids will feel like you really care about them, and it's kind of one of those things, like they'll invite you to the picnic, if you know what I mean. Now, I think also advocating for students is, if you see that a student is missing 8 assignments in your class, why haven't you said anything? Instead of complaining behind their back and complaining to the principal and waiting for it all to catch up so that they can't pass their class, shame on you. You should have been on that at the second or third zero. You should have been like, "Hey, what's up? How can I support you? Is there something you need? What's going on at home?" Try to advocate for these kids. I get so sick and tired of hearing people complain about kids not doing work in their class, and they have all these zeros sitting there and they're not doing anything to help the kids. It's like, I just think some people are in the wrong profession. Anyways, next, representation and leadership. We could use more diverse leadership. I think sometimes certain leaders have biases, and it leads to a higher result of suspension, school to prison pipeline, and having kids drop out of school and getting GEDs when they really could have graduated. And I think that's because we don't have enough representation in our schools. So that's something to look at. Representation in textbooks. Everybody is tired of seeing the same stale examples that have existed in certain textbooks. And while these textbook people are getting paid millions of dollars, kids are still being left behind because they're not relating to our kids. There's not relevance. There's not culture. There's not empathy. There's not a care. There's not a care to want to do it. You'll have textbook companies all the time that are adjusting, the content so that they can get paid, not necessarily so that they can relate to the kids. We need to do better. And we need to be better at the representation of who is writing our textbooks. What do they look like? What cultures do they come from? If you do not have a blend of cultures, listen, not just a blend of cultures, but cultures that are amplified. You can amplify the voices of those cultures. If you're not doing that, you're a hypocrite. You're just fooling yourself. And everybody's going to see when they use your stuff anyway that it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The kids aren't going to want it. So it's something to consider. And then, of course, advocating for parents and having parents on your side. Parents are the rock stars here. They don't have to send their kid to your school. They really don't. They could homeschool. They could start their own school. But the fact that they do that, and then some of these parents actually tolerate the disrespect, the suspensions, the foolishness, the racism, the ugliness that comes from the hearts of these leaders is sickening. The fact that these parents would be willing to do that, I think parents, I don't know, you're probably going to see a spike in homeschooling because parents are tired of how their children are being treated. That's one reason. But anyways, we need to represent, we need to help parents. We need to have resources with parents, have more parent nights. I think schools that have those powerful parent nights that they bring food and they understand the whole family element, they do so much better. Instead of saying, oh, well, Jaquita down there, and her family, they're going through so much and I just don't know. It's just a hot mess. I don't want to deal with it. Shame on you. Anyways, so those are some tips that I have on how we can boost academic proficiency in our nation. So I now want to pull up some articles for you that I found in different states, what's going on just in general. The first one that kind of caught my eye, it says here, it says U.S. students performing worse in school than 10 years ago. Okay. Horrible. Horrible. So here it says, a new report released Wednesday suggests that students in schools, U.S. schools, performing worse than their peers.
Now to the new report on the alarming American students' test scores. Elizabeth Schulze is here to break down the reading recession and what social media has to do with it. Good morning there. It's alarming.
It is alarming, and researchers, Robin, are calling this both a reading and learning recession at schools across the country. This new report called the Education Scorecard found that reading scores are down in 83% of school districts in the U.S. in the past 10 years. Math scores dropped in 70% of districts, and this does transcend wealthy and poor districts. What's critical here is that the decline in scores started happening before the pandemic. This report says there are a couple factors to blame. One is social media. So according to Pew Research, nearly half of teens say that they are online constantly. About 1/3 of 17-year-olds now say that they never or hardly ever read for fun. Researchers say that another factor is the end of that controversial No Child Left Behind law that did threaten penalties on schools that didn't meet national testing standards. Critics did call it too rigid, but the data shows it did coincide with at least a rise in math scores. Now, the teacher shortage, another issue here. This report does recommend identifying school districts that need more funding and encouraging coursework that keeps students engaged. And this is really key, keeping kids engaged, but also keeping them in class, because we know that.
All right. Pretty cool. Let's read it. So she went into it, and that's pretty horrible. That's 70% have dropped across the nation in math, and 83% dropped in English, performing worse than their peers a decade ago. The Education Scoreboard, Scorecard, a joint initiative from researchers at Harvard, Stanford, Dartmouth, analyzed students' reading and math scores. According to this report, it says that they started declining around 2013. Students' reading scores before the onset of the pandemic from 2017 to 2019 were already dropping, and as bad as they were during the pandemic. Eighth grader scores were at their lowest in 2025. All right, so this is very personal because I have an 8th grader, but I think he's going to do amazing. Here, this says the learning recession, that's the new code buzzword now, learning recession, started a decade ago after policymakers switched off the early warning system of test-based accountability and social media took over kids' lives. As they were saying here, it says we need to start addressing those factors that are leading to students being less engaged, like the fact that there's no representation and it's boring, stale teaching. It's just boring. Seriously, there's such a disconnect in the classroom. It's horrible in some classroom. All right. So it says overall, the report says that there's been some improvements in student test scores with some initiatives such as schools that have implemented the test or the science of reading phonics. So that's pretty sad, though, that's how, America is bent right now when it comes down to education. There just needs to be, I don't know, who are we putting in front of our kids? Like, maybe we need to look at our teacher choices. Maybe we need to look at our administrator choices. Why are we putting these people in front of our kids? You know what we need to do? Got it. we need to allow students to be a part of the hiring process, because they will be able to tell, especially like a junior or a senior, they will be able to tell who would be a good fit for the school culture and connecting with the kids. And then there would be more buy-in. I think that's the issue, because we're looking at putting people in the classroom from our lens, but we're 20 years removed from these kids, right? We don't think like them. We don't have the same ideas. We don't have the same perspective. So I think we should start putting students in, but put a student board in, like student government or something, someone that can sit in and tell, and maybe more than one student, maybe like your goody two shoes teacher pet student, but then like also another culturally represented student that knows the culture of the school and the social situations going on, that could really speak to a teacher that can help out. I think that would be a great idea. Anyways, why not? I want to now go into another article that I found for us. And it also is talking about proficiency, because today I'm going to talk about proficiency, because we've got to do better. We've got to do better. And so I found one that says, social media videos claims America's students are illiterate, and they are fueling growing about the state of education. Students struggle to pronounce words like silhouette, ordinary, but the numbers is more than nuanced and more complicated. Team that while they may not be what's considered illiterate, meaning they can't read or write sentences, the majority of U.S. students lack standard reading comprehension skills. What's going on in our reading classes? All right. According to the NAEP data here, the National Report Card, roughly 64% of fourth graders are not reading proficiently, which means you've got only 36% know what they're doing in your class, and then 1/3 or 33% meet proficiency. Yeah, so 33%. Then it says education specialists say a proficient reader should be able to comprehend grade level material. The same old. Draw conclusions from the text, right? There's a couple of factors that they do contribute to this, though. They say that there was the pandemic learning loss, teacher shortages, right? Because no teacher wants to go to school to be disrespected or possibly shot at by a student. And then also increased screen time, classroom disruptions, changes in reading instruction methods. Okay, let's compare globally. International testing shows U.S. performs above global average in reading, but still trails several top performing countries. Of course, unfortunately, for International Student Assessment, or PISA, found countries including Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and several European nations routinely outperform the U.S. Oh, there you have it. There you have it. And that's why they're knocking down the door to get over here so that they can just take over. What can low literacy mean for the economy? This means lower earning potential, reduced productivity, few career opportunities, higher unemployment rates, services. The National Literacy Institute estimates that low literacy may cost the. So there you have it there. Reading is definitely correlated to math, but you see that we have, like they said, it could cost us up to $2 trillion in damages because kids can't read. So let's keep it moving. Whew, y'all, this is heavy. What are we doing? What are we doing in education? What are we doing? All right. I want to now talk about Delaware, good old Delaware. New Harvard Stanford education report raises fresh questions about Delaware school performance. Okay. Wait, was that actually oh, look at the maps here. So the big takeaway away. America's learning recession began before COVID. Reading scores have declined since 2013 before the pandemic. COVID made math losses worse, but reading was already failing. Recovery is progress depends on strategy and accountability. Spending more helps. Spending where? Spending for what? It needs to go to the kids and the parents. They talk about the different factors here. Chart, you can see it says performance remains low. Academic decline began before pandemic. Recovery has been U-shaped since 2022. Chronic absenteeism remains a major problem. Federal pandemic funding was massive and uneven, yes, because the allocation is not fair. And then accountability has weakened nationwide. People just don't care. So here it says the May 2026 Education Score Report produced by researchers from Harvard and Stanford concludes that U.S. has entered a learning recession. There's our buzzword, beginning around 2013. Growth started after 2013 with reading scores declining steadily for years before the pandemic. Accelerated learning losses. There you go, another buzzword. Say what you got to say to get to get in. For Delaware, the findings mirror many concerns already driving debates over school accountability, literacy, instruction, absenteeism, and academic performance. Okay, it says Delaware's education system is clearly not alone in facing these challenges, the report suggests, but the data increasingly raises questions about whether current strategies are producing results fast enough. Obviously not. So here it says, according to Delaware's Department of Education, only 41% of 3rd through 8th graders are proficient, and only 34% are proficient in math. There you have it. Among 11th graders, SAT proficiency is 47% for reading, and then math proficiency is only 18%. That's a hot mess, only 18%. Okay, and then it says here, 8th grade NAEP scores are at the lowest since 1990. We're going way backwards. And then while 4th grade reading scores have fallen back to pre-2003 levels. We're going down, down, down. Down, down, down. Horrible. Now look, how much money are we receiving for these kids? So the scores are going low, but what's going on with the money? You get about $3,700 per student in federal pandemic aid in Delaware. Some high districts that are high in poverty received more than $6,100 per student, and then even some up to $10,700 per student. You're telling me you're receiving $10,000 for a student and then they're still not passing? We're doing something wrong. Definitely doing something wrong. They talk about chronic absenteeism. It rose from 20% before the pandemic to 37%. And then the results still remain elevated. So there's a lot here. It's just a lot here. It's unfortunate. All right, so now let's take a look at California. We've looked at Delaware. Let's hop over to California. Maybe we can hop over to Florida when we get a chance. So it says California needs to double down on attention to math, researchers say. Okay, this is by John, and he published it yesterday. So it says, top takeaways, district leaders rank math third, far beyond or behind literacy, social emotional learning as priorities. Math lacks dedicated state funding for professional development. Really? Where's the money going? And training in most districts is voluntary. The gap between students from the highest and lowest income California districts grew to 2.7 grade levels in 2024. All right, so it says state leaders recent attention to early literacy has led to funding and new programs to help close the literacy gap. But math, the state hasn't focused on it, and that neglect shows. The state and national scores reflect many of math's systemic weaknesses, according to a paper that is part of the sweeping research project, getting down to the facts. Well, how bad is it? The gap in math education between the highest and lowest income students have grown. Income, okay? Grown from 1.9 to 2.7 grade levels. It's all about socioeconomic status. The rich kids get it. Poor kids are left behind. There you have it. There you have it. Horrible. Let's show it to you again. Look at that. That's horrible. What a gap. The rich win in California, it seems. So it says significantly raising California's math achievement will require addressing compounding issues. The research briefed Mathematics in California Gaps Capacity and Implementation by Elizabeth Hoppaker, an assistant professor of education policy at UF. Go Gators. She says this, that districts are deprioritizing the math. So while 63% of California districts ranked ELA as their top priority, only 16% ranked math first. There's disparities in hiring. Teachers need highest need districts encounter the most difficulty hiring and retaining math teachers. Let's keep going. Little math training, right? They're just throwing anybody in there. And then many districts are ignoring the new state's framework. So in 2023, the state board adopted a new controversial math framework that provides a grade-by-grade guide for implementing the state's math standards, but many districts aren't deploying it or instructing teachers on how to use it. Only 1/4 of district leaders say the framework drives their math lessons, and 30% says it's not a driver at all. School leaders cite the framework's 900-page length as one obstacle. That is a lot to take in. So others cite its emphasis on teaching concepts behind the math procedures. So one math leader explained, many of our elementary teachers do not have deep content knowledge in math. There you have it. There you have it. It's who we're putting in front of our kids, which makes it difficult to teach conceptually. So it says, another said, sometimes you design for maybe the top 10% of teachers who really can do this. Meanwhile, there's 90% of teachers who are like, I just don't know what you're talking about. Horrible. Also, another problem, too many curriculum, too many textbooks to choose from. State board recently approved 64 math textbooks. Yeah, their heads are spinning. And it's left up to the districts, right? Many of them lack time or expertise. And so compare that to the new early literacy law, in which they say the state will select a list of evidence-based literacy curricula and require districts to choose. Okay? So there's too much autonomy there. Math scores decline as students move through K-8. Smarter Balance tests, they said that 46% were proficient in math in the 3rd grade, and only 33% were proficient in 8th grade. So you can see this is just going down. And I honestly think it's a socioeconomic gap over here in California. So making math a state priority. Very interesting. So we could keep going and going. I'm actually going to stop sharing because it's just a lot. Another report about Florida. Let's go, Florida. All right. So it says here, Central Florida students, so you're talking about Orlando, they face a learning recession. Everybody's talking about this learning recession. Okay, as math reading scores hit historic lows. I might as well start talking about the learning recession too. Okay, so students across Central Florida are dealing with what is being called learning recession. New data reveals unprecedented declines in academic performance. 8th graders in Florida have scored their lowest in math scores in 20 years, while reading scores have reached the lowest levels on record. Wow, that's horrible. So as you can see, this is not just California, it's also Florida, it's also Delaware, probably even New York, it's probably all over. And the only thing we really can do is just to see how we could really step in and provide representation to support our kids. So thank you so much again, guys. That's going to wrap up my session today on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. Amy White. Thank you for joining me. Again, check out my social media platforms whenever you get a chance and follow me on them. You can check out the website, www.india-white.com, for some cool things going on there. And then, of course, we have some upcoming events, FCTM, and I have a virtual math event in Texas. And then we have the G.R.I.T Academy. Okay, always there for you. And so, again, guys, thank you so much again for joining me on the Let's Get Gritty podcast. This was a pretty cool episode. Feel free to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and feel free to share this out with your colleagues that might be able to use it. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.